Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Storytime with Bucho. I'm Bucho. It's very seriously considering getting some opening credit music at this point because we're just getting right into the videos. Um, Today I'm going to read you a story from my second book, from the Machinery of the Heart, Love Stories. This one's called Movie Music, and it was kind of my take on kind of a critique of how music can be used in movies to kind of intentionally taint or put guardrails up and make viewers feel something that maybe they don't want to feel, depending on how the moment goes. So let's get into it. This is a movie. There is no music, no soundtrack, no artificial sound effects. There is sound, but it is natural, created by the moments that occur in real time. We don't want to affect your interpretation of the moment by playing melancholic notes that elicit sadness or joyful arpeggios that evoke some kind of happiness. We don't want to frighten you with piano stabs that jar the ears or shake the soul. We don't want to give you the solitary violin solo when the protagonist dies or loses a lover. What you feel should be real and true. It should be influenced by nothing other than the action at hand. Life does not have a soundtrack. Life is not a movie. This is the opening sequence. Text flits across the screen, names of actors known and unknown, producers known and unknown, director known and unknown, other behind the scenes bit players who were instrumental in turning this dream into an on-screen reality, all unknowns. The text itself is plain and tells you very little about the movie you're about to see. It gives no clues as to which direction the narrative will flow. The white lettered words fade in, solidify, fade out, all against the backdrop of a cityscape at night. The camera moves down the street as if driving a car, capturing the sidewalk moments as it passes. A couple on the left stumble and laugh as they hold tight to each other. A solitary figure on the right walks with his head down, smoking, his features hidden by his own exhalations. He wears a black peacoat, collar upturned to block the chill of the night. A plaid scarf lays wrapped around his neck, its ends hanging low against his stomach, a fashionable noose in reverse. His face reveals nothing. It is placid and calm, devoid of any emotion or hint of thought as he walks. The camera breaks off as if exiting the car still in motion. The camera swoops onto the sidewalk, comes up behind the man, and follows him. His steps echo in the night against the backdrop of rowdy bar patrons and catcalling streetwalkers hoping to fill both their nightly quotas and themselves. The view changes. The camera faces his left side as he walks. A smile breaks as he waves off the nightwalkers, tells them no thank you, continues to smoke his cigarette. This is the protagonist. You will watch him rise and fall and possibly rise again in the course of the next 97 minutes. He contains personality traits that you love. He contains personality traits that irritate you. In some ways, he is you. In others, he is someone you know, someone you have loved in a previous life. Through the hand of someone else's imagination, you have felt yourself connected to this person that does not actually exist except on screen. That this person is not real does not sever the emotional connection. That this person is not real does not stop you from choking up at the key moments of high emotion. The litany of names and Hollywood entities that have collaborated to create this motion picture stops scrolling across the screen as he enters an apartment building several minutes later. The camera remains outside, pans up, follows the protagonist's climb up the windowed stairwell of the building. The walls inside are dingy white. In places, the paint peels. It is an older building, but a nice one despite the apparent lack of upkeep. The view changes to a closer angle. The camera is now inside the darkened apartment, facing the door as it opens. The protagonist steps in, drops his keys in an unseen bowl that chimes, and walks towards the camera in the dark. A refrigerator light illuminates a small part of the kitchen right off the hallway. Shown in the light, a countertop, a few dishes, some silverware, a spice rack, a tiny wall-mounted stereo above the backsplash. This is where he does his cooking, very little, eats, a great deal, and listens to the news on the radio, often. The refrigerator door shuts. The kitchen lights are flipped on. A note, hidden by the dark, is held up by magnets on the freezer door. "Don't forget," it reads, simple and vague in a woman's handwriting. The handwriting is from the protagonist's love interest, though he does not think she feels the same towards him. The camera pans in, focuses on the note and the pictures surrounding it. Pictures of the protagonist and a pretty woman with long dark hair, a wide, genuine smile, and eyes deeper than sound. In this camera shot, 4 photo booth pictures of the couple stacked on top of each other, each one sillier than the one before it. In this camera shot, a group photo where she is piggybacking him, both laughing with open mouths, her arms wrapped tight around his chest. In this camera shot, a night out. They stand together, posing, with her in stylish black dress, and he clad in 2 parts of a 3-piece suit, the slacks and the vest. The protagonist removes a tumbler from the cabinets, fills it with ice, and then tops it with a brown liquor from one of several bottles littering the countertop. He lets the glass sit and sweat on the counter as he removes his coat, tosses it onto the back of a chair, and rummages through his mail, which he tosses into the trash immediately after. He grabs the drink and settles onto his couch. The camera angle changes. He is now seemingly sitting on top of the television and focused on the protagonist as he drinks and flips through the channels. The light of the idiot box filling the dark living room. The camera fades to black. Daylight. This is the beginning of exposition and the first hints of rising action. The camera moves from scene to scene, showing a city waking up. Food vendors setting up shiny, steel-plated breakfast carts, joggers running through parks, other city dwellers crammed tight on public transit lumbering through the cityscape. The camera moves through the subway crowd, finds the protagonist holding on to the ceiling rails and trying to make himself as thin as possible for the other riders squeezing in around him. If he is currently uncomfortable or annoyed, his face does not reveal it. The camera follows him when he exits at his stop, follows him up the stairs leading to the street, follows him across avenues and alleyways until he arrives at a nondescript building. He enters through the glass doors, passes a security desk with a wave and a smile to the guard on duty, hustles into a quickly closing elevator. The camera focuses in on the doors closing, only to have them open again 4 floors later, where he exits. The camera angle moves in parallel along the opposite side of the office, follows the protagonist on the far side of the room as he maneuvers his way past interns and staff, finds his cubicle to begin his day. The angle changes, focuses in on the top of his workstation as he hangs up his coat and drops his leather shoulder bag to the floor. 1 stapler, random paper clips strewn about, papers of various color in various trays denoting various levels of work completion. The computer is booting up and a light blinks on his desk phone. He lifts the receiver and dials, listening to a message you can't hear. The camera pans up to his face, which remains unreadable until he raises his eyebrows and the hint of a smile plays itself across his face. This is where the plot thickens, expands, adds complications where none existed before. This is where the narrative arc peaks and then dives only to maybe peak again later. Exposition as filler occurs, giving you, the viewer, more to watch as events unfurl behind the visible scenes. This is where a montage of mild action scenes occurs, following the protagonist through the motions of getting promoted, moving from his desk to another on a different floor. This is the video montage where the protagonist meets new people, creates new confidences in the new strangers around him. This is where new characters are introduced, co-workers, friends, colleagues of a different sort. Some will remain as key players, while others will play ancillary roles in the life of this fictional character, flitting in and out randomly. They will be there to help him suss out the necessary solutions, or inadvertently create more complications regarding his actions and thoughts from here on out. These are the necessary moving parts that give momentum to the bigger story, which has yet to reveal itself, though you can sense the real story unspooling as the movie plays on. Nighttime. The protagonist talks on the phone, pacing his living room as he tells his love interest about the surprising promotion he got at work that morning. It is a little extra money, he tells her, with a little more responsibility and a larger cubicle on a different floor. Though you cannot hear her words exactly, you can sense that she is sincere in her excitement for him by the tone of her voice. He agrees to meet her for drinks, hangs up, and leaves the apartment. The camera goes dark before opening up on a scene of two drinks on the bar, a rocks glass and a martini glass, both sweating from the chilled liquid within them. The protagonist's voice comes from out of frame, followed by the voice of his female friend. The banter is quick and playful, sometimes flirty, but never overtly so. What you, the viewer, deduce is that these two have known each other for a very long time, or they are at least very close. You've seen this game play out before, seen this narrative in thousands of movies that have come before, and yet it still evokes the same kind of feeling in you when you actually connect with the characters on screen. Fight it all you want, but the bubble that grows and rises in your chest moves up to your throat. You see them together finally and realize they look like a perfect match. You want this for them. You want this for you because it feels right. This is the truth found in the viewable fiction. The camera focuses in on the drinks again, the liquid inside having sunk lower and lower. New drinks are placed behind the old ones, ready to be guzzled down. Their speech slows down as if their minds have been filled with molasses. Stuttered words and slurred ideas slink through the theater speakers. The audience knows what the characters are trying to say as they speak past each other, each trying to intimate their intentions towards the other, but the absolute want deflates in the air before it ever reaches the ears. The flirting becomes awkward, stilted. This is the nature of the third shared drink. Poor attempts at smooth verbal acrobatics. You cringe at their lackluster mating dance, but this is how things often go in life, no? The fourth drink arrives, and truth with it. Halfway through, her hand reaches out for his, wrapped around the rocks glass. The protagonist looks up at her, first confused and then understanding. He lays his free hand over hers, wrapped around his, wrapped around the glass, before leaning in to whisper something in her ear. You cannot hear what he says, but by the way she lowers her head, pulls loose strands of her hair behind her ear with her free hand, and leans into the whisper while smiling, you can infer intent. The camera is back in the protagonist's darkened apartment, focused squarely on his door. Light from the hallway spills through the cracks on every side. The sound of keys jangling against the lock and then being dropped on the hallway floor is clear, though slightly muffled beneath drunk, whispering voices. The sound of shoes on wood flooring, fabric on fabric, keys against glass bowl. No symphonic strings, no ache-inducing arpeggios, no melody other than that of the physical courtship taking place in the dark. It is late, and the protagonist stumbles into the hallway, followed closely by his love interest, light spilling in behind them and filling up the screen, silhouetting the two before the door is shut behind them again. The sound of walls being bumped into and bodies smushed against each other. A light flickers on and the apartment becomes dimly lit as the camera follows the protagonist and his love interest into the kitchen. This is the scene where they are alone, where the chemistry between person and person becomes tangible and real and makes them one. This is where the soft touch of anxious lips nearly meet. This is where your heartbeat picks up, quickens, delighted that the protagonist is getting something he wants because it is the only true thing he knows or believes in. This is where the protagonist feels the butterflies in his stomach flit back to life for the first time in a decade. This is where the heat from hands and fingers is electric, where each touch, each connection sends vibrations through him as if this were the first time his affection had ever been returned. This is the sound of papers pushed to the floor off counters, of hair being pushed aside by wanting hands, of clothing rubbed against clothing, as want rubs against want. This is the sound of the protagonist's lips against his love interest's neckline, against her clavicle, against the divot in her chest that hints at other curves in need of attention. This is the sound of ravenous desire, unimpeded by some orchestral addition, by some music plucked and bowed intentionally to evoke a certain emotion from the audience. You know these characters now. You know what you want for both of them. This is the love scene done in alternating shots in the dark, the standard images of lovers wrapped up in each other, a flurry of roaming hands and shared kisses as they move through the apartment, the camera moving from wide-out shots to close-ups with increasing frequency, the change happening rapidly over and over to mimic the passion of the moment. This is their clothing being removed hastily, thrown about without a care. This is him shirtless. This is her bra falling to the floor. This is the two of them staring at each other, smiling as pants come unzipped and crumple around ankles. These are the sheets thrown off the bed as hands and lips drink in the skin. Everything about the moment a lustful explosion of need and sweat, each tongue fumbling to taste the other wildly. There is a brief moment where his hands hover over a scar-shaped birthmark along the left side of her abdomen. Her hand covers his, moves it down her body to where her wanting throbs. The camera darkens, leaving the lovers alone to their privacy. And then opens up on the next morning with the protagonist waking up. She is gone, as is the clothing she left scattered throughout the apartment. A weird smile plays across his face, both confusion and joy, as he buries his face in the pillows, inhales and smiles because they still smell like her, the sheets more so. He rises and cleans up the kitchen and the hallway leading to his room before he showers and heads to work, forgetting to eat a quick breakfast. This is a wide-out shot of the city. Sunlight reflects off the glass of corporate buildings downtown. The view pans down to street level as the protagonist enters one of the hundreds of structures. He carries a nondescript coffee cup and wears a smile that everyone seems to notice. His wave to the security guard as he passes by is more animated than usual. That he is crammed into the elevator with others, all unsmiling or who sigh in exaggerated ways at the start of a new day, does nothing to diminish his mood. The camera follows him as he exits on the 4th floor, strides to his desk, and powers up his computer while it spins once in his chair, trying to mentally hold on to the previous night's luck, hoping to remember every stitch of happening that occurred over the course of several hours. He replays the highlights in his mind, forgetting completely that he is at work. He spins in his chair again, staring up into the camera that hangs above, capturing his glee. A coworker arrives. The badge attached to his belt loop says Lionel as he leans against the cubicle wall, laughing at our protagonist. Morning greetings are shared, a milder, work-safe version of the previous night's activities is recounted as the camera moves down from the ceiling to pan out and include both men in the shot. The conversation ends as the camera pans out farther to a wider shot of the entire office, finally stopping behind the desk of another, as yet unknown coworker several cubicles away. From the angle, it is clear our protagonist can overhear the conversation. His hands stop typing as the phrase birthmark shaped like a scar is uttered from the unknown coworker. His fingers freeze in the air, tremble just enough to show that he is affected by what the conversation could mean. The camera shot becomes his line of vision. We, the viewers, become him. He balls his hands into fists and looks over the cubicle walls, only to see Lionel walking back to his desk on the far side of the office. The unknown coworker stands up from his cubicle as if he has immediate business elsewhere. He looks around and sees the look on our protagonist's face. The camera pans out wide, sees both men lock eyes for an uncomfortable few seconds, and then the unknown coworker strides out of his cubicle and out of the scene to pour to some other part of the office, his reaction revealing nothing. The protagonist returns back to his typing. The camera darkens. The camera opens up on dusk in the city. The sunset through the buildings is a bright and brilliant orange, slowly melting into deepest purple. If there was music in this movie, this might be the place to play the minor keys with extra spaces between notes, hinting at some kind of sadness on the way. On a subconscious level, the music would tell you how to feel, but as a viewer, you already know how to feel. The director has given you little bits of information for you to decipher, an emotional puzzle that puts you directly in the protagonist's shoes. You worry that the coincidence is too much, too easy, especially in a city that size. What are the chances that would really happen? And yet, outside of the movie theater, outside of the movie screen, that same kind of coincidence of shared lovers can and often does happen. The camera pans out from the cityscape and seems to go right through the protagonist's window, focusing on him lounging in his living room. The television is on, but the volume is turned down. A glass of amber sweats on his coffee table as his thumb bounces across the buttons of his phone. The camera focuses in on the screen where we see that his texts to his love interest have not been responded to all day. The camera follows him as he stands, polishes his drink. He heads to the kitchen to pour another and turns out all the lights in frustration. This is his body language and facial expression, showing that the morning's joy has been ushered out of him through her silence. He is deflated in every sense of the word. Fade to black. Fade in. Our protagonist is still in bed. The late morning sun spills into his room, turning his white sheets brighter. His eyes are barely open, but he is awake, head turned on the pillow as he stares at his phone on the nightstand. The screen is dark, the implication being she still has not called or texted back. An exaggerated sigh passes his lips before he closes his eyes again. It's Saturday, so the need to leave the bed does not exist. He picks up the phone and thumbs it open, knowing full well she has not replied while he slept. He runs his thumbs over the numbers, debating whether he should call or text again. He knows she has received his other messages, so would sending another even help? Or would it ultimately hurt? The anguish on his face is obvious and understandable. He turns to the window, sees and hears pigeons on his windowsill softly cooing at each other. He closes the phone, chews on the corner of it anxiously, fully knowing that another message will not make her reply any faster. Eventually, he tosses the phone across the room into a pile of laundry and turns back to the pigeons at the window, soaking up their softly cooed lullaby. Through careful editing, the screen mimics his heavy-lidded eyes struggling to stay open before finally fade to black. The camera opens up on the apartment. It's hinted that several days have passed as the camera pans across the living room and the breakfast nook and the kitchen before moving slowly down the hallway to his bedroom. Each area seems disheveled, disorganized. Normally tidy, our protagonist's apartment has become a refuge for empty pizza boxes and nearly empty bottles of both liquor and beer. He has become a horrible, horrible cliché of the lovelorn, the stricken, the emotionally dispossessed. The camera moves up towards the ceiling, facing down, showing him to be splayed out like a starfish on his bed wearing nothing but underwear. His face is covered in stubble, and he stares up at the screen, up into the camera, as if trying to make an emotional appeal to the audience with only his eyes. They are wide and red-rimmed, as if he has not slept, or, if he has, his sleep has been exceedingly poor. The sound of soft vibration through the camera. The protagonist struggles to stand, does so slowly as if his balance is in question. Does he remember where he threw the phone? The audience does, but we watch as he plods through the room, nearly indifferent to its sound, rummaging through clothes, both dirty and clean, rummaging beneath piles of mail, lifting his bedsheets and shaking them out. Still the phone vibrates, and then silence. Eventually he finds the phone and flips it open. The camera pans into the screen and shows unknown number across the top. He holds the phone close, staring at it as if wishing for a prayer to come true. The vibrations stop. No message is left. No number is given. His knuckles redden as his grip tightens around the phone. This is the sound of his imagination running wild. This is the sound of him imagining her with someone else. This is the sound of her laughter ringing in his ears, the sound of her breathing against his chest. This is the sound of him pacing the apartment, filled with equal parts of adoration and disdain for her, vacillating between the two endlessly because they are both true feelings in his mind. They are able to coexist together equally. This is the sound of him trying to explain away her silence, trying to put logic before passion and failing miserably. This is the sound of him talking to himself, wondering why she couldn't simply call or even text him. This is the sound of his apartment cowering in fear, wondering if it will be the unwilling recipient of someone else's fist through one of its walls again. This is the sound of waiting silence. This is the sound of bare feet upon carpet covered in open mail. This is the sound of seconds ticking by like hours. This is the sound of flies landing on pizza boxes in the kitchen. This is the sound of silent days lasting too long, of the time spent at work in a cubicle feeling more like time spent in a prison. The camera moves to the ceiling, faces straight down to show the entire room. Stop-motion photography will show us the movement of our protagonist as he paces the room, sleeps on the couch, sits staring blankly at his television, or makes attempts to read to take his mind off of her. Eventually he'll come to understand that she won't be returning his call. Time will move normally again. His will be the sound of productivity, of moving on, of putting her out of mind. Time will be back in his control at some point, but he does not believe this worldly truth right now. He cannot think rationally, but beyond the moment. The camera fades in to show our protagonist's apartment building. Months have passed. It's winter now. Mounds of snow sit perched on every windowsill of the building. Wind passes, carries with it tiny flurries that drift along the currents, and makes it feel like it is snowing all over again, despite the storm having stopped late last night. The world glistens and sparkles. The camera comes closer to the building, seemingly passing right through the protagonist's window and into his bedroom. He is dressing in front of a full-length mirror, perched precariously on the floor and leaning against the wall. He wears dark jeans, thick wool socks, and a button-up dress shirt that he will cover with a beige and red sweater he received for Christmas. We watch as the camera follows him to the bathroom, where he checks his hair, spits mouthwash out into the sink, and then heads to the living room to put on his coat and boots. The camera moves to the hallway, where we watch as he exits, locks the door, and heads down the stairwell out into snowy weather. He turns his phone on, chooses a playlist, and slides a knit stocking hat over his head, covering his ears and headphones. The music is minimal, crystalline. A piano score from some movie that the audience can barely hear. The camera follows him out into the snow, his breath coming out like smoke from a raging fire within him. A woman walks on the other side of the street. He doesn't recognize her, but she is his old friend, the one who has yet to ring him back after their summer tryst. Her presence barely raises a blip on his internal radar, and so he continues back on his way to work, unaware that she is there. The volume on his headphones turned up loud enough to drown out anyone speaking on the bus. The woman sees him, instantly recognizes him across the traffic. She yells his name several times to get his attention, but she thinks he's ignoring her as he doesn't stop, but keeps walking on, trudging through the snow. She waves her hands in the air over and over, to no avail. An older man walking his dog looks at her funny as his dog does its business. The dog finishes and leads the man down the sidewalk. The man whistles some old song that she can remember, but just barely. It sits on the tip of her tongue, just out of reach. The song will play in her head all day as she wonders why her friend did not turn around to greet her. The camera moves a close-up to her face and records the confusion in her eyes and the slowly disappearing smile before turning back to watch the protagonist walk down the sidewalk and turn the corner. Fade to black. Thanks for tuning in, guys. If you like what you're hearing, you can purchase this at one of the links below in the description. I hope you will tune in next week for another episode. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit subscribe if you like what you're hearing, and please support a starving artist. Thanks.